Thank you for joining me today. My name is Holly Neuman. I'm a behavioral health counselor with QuadMed, EAP Behavioral Health and Substance Use Counseling. Today, specifically in honor of May being Mental Health Awareness Month, I will be talking about ways to cope with stress and really understanding what is stress, is it good, is it bad, what are some sources of stress, and some great ways to manage stress as well. So we'll start with understanding what is stress and how and why we experience stress. So stress is basically anything that triggers our mind and body's response to a challenge or a threat. And that's really vague intentionally, because what a challenge or threat is to one person is not going to be the same challenge or threat to another. You might hear stories about some people kind of going through really, really difficult times, and they'll tell you, well, you know, it's something that I just did, it's something that I got through. Whereas you might be have gone through other really challenging things, and the person next to you is like, wow, I don't know how you could have survived that. Like, I never would have been able to get through that. Stress to everyone is going to be different and very individual to each person. So it's important not to be too judgmental or critical about how you are coping with different stressors at different times in your life. The human body is biologically programmed to deal with stress, and the stress response is very important to our survival. In the beginning, as humans were on this earth, we were given the ability, that fight or flight response, or basically what I call the 4 F's of survival, which is fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. So essentially, if a bear comes up to you in the woods, you have 4 options. You can fight it, run away from it, you can play dead, or you can convince it not to eat you. These responses have shifted over time as we have adapted to a different kind of threat. And one threat that we often have to deal with in the 21st century is a threat to our self-concept, or a threat to our ability to kind of fit in or feel good enough in situations. And so shame is a really big stressor. Anytime that we can be experiencing a sense of shame or a sense of just feeling not good enough is a really big stressor in our lives. And so you might find that different times in your life where shame is kind of at its highest, you may find that you have a more difficult time coping with stress. Small amounts of stress is really helpful to us. Think about when you have to take a big test, for example, or when you have like a small challenge that you need to overcome. It can feel really good. I mean, even completing a puzzle can be a piece of stress that we can go through. And our bodies and minds are equipped to deal with that stress, and completing and overcoming that stress is really helpful and healthy for us. But chronic stress, stress that we're not able to get rid of, not able to problem solve, and not able to cope with, can lead to physical and mental health problems like depression, anxiety, high blood pressure, migraines, and cardiovascular disease. So what kind of situations or circumstances cause stress? Both scary, negative, bad kind of experiences can be stressful, but so can really positive experiences. A marriage, a new baby, a new house, a new job. While all of these experiences can be really rewarding and really exciting in happy times, they can also lead to stress. And any kind of challenge or threat, whether good or bad, can cause stress for our bodies and our minds. So how do we cope with stress when it comes up? Number one, the most important piece is to connect with our support system. I think a lot of us have that flight response when it comes to stress. We want to avoid, and there are a lot of ways to avoid situations, either by withdrawing, calling into work, not responding to text messages, not calling our friends, not talking about it in general. And so connecting with our support system, both our informal and formal support network, can help us cope with stress by helping us problem solve, by connecting us to resources that are important for us, and by just being that encouragement and that kind of emotional support to help us get through a difficult time. Another important way to cope with stress is reevaluating our priorities. When we are feeling stressed, and you've all heard the phrase, when it rains, it pours, right? When we're facing a stressful situation, a lot of times it's because there are a lot of stressors going on all at the same time. And so it's really important to prioritize and kind of play a little bit of triage. What is the most important thing that I need to worry about right now? And we have to be willing to let go of the things that we don't necessarily have time for, or just it's not important for us to invest our time and resources in. The second piece of that is learning to set boundaries. So we want to be choosy with how we spend our time and energy, being really picky about where I'm going to put my energy and resources and what I have to say no to. And sometimes that does mean setting down important responsibilities, but those important responsibilities just aren't as important as the other things that I have going on in my life right now. And I have to be okay with that. Practicing self-care, right? You can't pour from an empty cup. And so self-care is about those like activities of daily living, right? Nutrition, sleep, exercise, making sure that we're getting that good 7 to 9 hours of sleep, that we're getting healthy, well-balanced meals, and exercise. Exercise is a great stress reducer. It actually helps stop that fight or flight response that our nervous system is sending through our body to cope with that stress. But self-care is also those hobbies and leisure activities, just doing things because they're fun and enjoyable. All work and no play does make Jack a dull boy. So I encourage you to take that self-care to just feed your soul and to feed your emotional well-being. Keeping things in perspective is also important. I think when we are faced with big challenges in life, we see them as an insurmountable problem. But the important thing is to look at them as temporary challenges, and even reminding yourself of things that you've overcame in the past, right? Something I tell myself, I've so far survived everything that life has thrown at me so far, even a global pandemic that I wasn't quite anticipating. And so if I can get through this, what can't I get through? Using healthy distractions is also really helpful. I think a lot of times we're at that point in a stressful situation where we've done everything that we can to problem solve up until a certain point, but then we just have to get through. And so deep breathing, meditation, exercise, music, prayer, movies and TV, games and hobbies are all important to help you get through a difficult time. And my last piece of advice for coping with stress is working towards realistic goals. Breaking down those long-term goals into smaller, more manageable steps, and being sure that you're not expecting too much of yourself in the moment.